So today, this is an information session on the condition of the organ and the church building. At a couple of points, we'll open up to the floor for questions. So as you listen to the presentation, make notes, mental or on your iPhones, to raise, and the members of the organ committee will march up front and be prepared to respond to your questions. On January 25th, we're going to have another session to look at the preliminary results of the strategic planning process about the future directions of the church. We'll have tabletop discussions. We want your input in that. Help us prioritize. You tell us what is most important to you, and that will have a big influence on the result. And then we'll summarize all the physical planning issues and ask you to tell us what you think the most important things are for us to do. Now, this process that we've been through for the last couple of years began in February of 2013 with the famous DOT process, which you all participated in. And I kept this image so that you can be reminded on the bottom, we can all be reminded on the bottom right-hand side what Lloyd Hall looked like from the outside in February of 2013. And the DOT process, in which green dots represent the best places, red dots the worst places, blue dots the places most important to be improved, led us to make a series of small-scale improvements. We generated a shopping list from your input, and most dramatically and joyously, what we thought was going to be a meeting just to determine what was important somehow magically transformed into an auction. And the parish generally came forward, and before we knew it, there was $70,000 in budget that we didn't have before, which enabled us to do the full list of the shopping list. So therefore, we believe in shopping lists. Now, it's true that the organ is a much bigger price tag than any of the items that we dealt with in 2013, but it's still part of a shopping list. Maybe the pipes become individual items that people can buy. I don't know, but there's some way in which we can move forward. But one thing that was stunning about this was how clearly everyone loves the worship space and church of Christ in St. Luke's, the music program, and the organ. The same thing happened in 2014. When we did another process, the green indicating the places that everybody thinks are in best shape, the purple areas that need to be improved. It's clearly seen as the space, as the focus of our life as a community. It establishes a magical context in which we come together. And it's that kind of focus that we share that enables us to be a diverse parish, because what we share is so important emotionally to us that it's much more important than the differences that might separate us. Now, in the process of getting Wynne to settle down as permanent rector here last year, we had a parish survey at Wynne's insistence and request. And this word diagram has the words that emerged most often in a positive way in that survey. And it's very clear that the church building, the music program, the choir are all very, very important as the main focus of our life together as a parish. Therefore, it makes sense that although the worship space may look like it's in perfect order, I'm sorry to say it's not. There are a series of problems. Historic buildings require constant maintenance and repairs. The organ sounds wonderful because Marge and Kevin are extraordinary improvisers. So that if something blows a gasket in the middle of a service, we in the congregation will never know it. And it does happen. And that's all right up to a point, but after a while, it's not going to work. Now, I thought you might be interested in just a little bit of context for the construction of our church, Christ in St. Luke's. I'll talk a little bit about the existing building, and then this mysterious person, Ralph Adams Cram. Sigurd Whitaker, who's a member of the steering committee, is writing a history of Christ in St. Luke's. She says it's going to be a cocktail table book, right, Sigurd? That we hope will be a national bestseller, celebrating our wonderful building and its history. And she came across a line indicating that Ralph Adams Cram was supervising architect, which, if it's true, which we're not sure at all, in fact we doubt it, but if it were true, it would mean that he did the initial drawings, which is a really, 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 really big deal in the world of architecture. So who was Ralph Adams Cram? So I thought I might introduce you to him. Cheerful fellow that he is, or in any case, this is our space, which the very first time I entered it, the first name that sprang to my mind when I walked in was Cram, in the glorious name. Well, here's Ralph Adams Cram in his very cheerful expression. It's interesting, all the photographs throughout his life have exactly the same expression on it. I don't know how he managed that, but he was a very flamboyant and colorful character who made broke into the big time when he won the competition for the chapel at West Point. Now, he was part, even though he started, I think, as a Unitarian, he was part of supporting the Oxford-Cambridge movement in both liturgy and architecture. You know, at the early part of the end of the 18th, early 19th century, worship in England was based largely on the spoken word. People felt, after a while, liturgically deprived, and looked to Catholic churches and Gothic churches and the liturgies and monasteries as a source of reviving this sense of the mystical. That's when choirs got expanded and put in robes that look a little bit like monks, but not quite, in order for the service to have that whole atmosphere. And that created a series of movements in architecture. One in the early 19th century, if you look at St. Mary's, you know St. Mary's in Norfolk, and Freemason Street Baptist Church. I made the mistake in public of calling it the Freemason Baptist Church, and the minister came up outraged telling me that it was the Freemason Street Baptist Church. Baptists don't hold much for Freemasons. But anyway, so that's the first American Gothic revival. The second American Gothic revival was initiated by Cram and others, which is much more authentic English or French, but particularly English Perpendicular Gothic, translated into an almost modern style of architecture. So he became instantly famous with West Point. Henry Clay Frick, the man who established U.S. Steel, one of the wealthiest men in the world at that time, brought Cram to Pittsburgh to design Calvary Episcopal Church, shortly after the West Point Chapel. Marilyn and I were members of this church for 30 years, so therefore when we walked into Christ in St. Luke's a couple years ago, we immediately felt at home. But you can see the English Gothic is translated. Then another example is the Rockefeller Chapel at the University of Chicago. We seem to work with millionaires all the time. Unfortunately, there are not many patrons like that around anymore. But anyway, and it creates a very compelling Gothic architecture. The Cathedral of St. John the Divine includes the nave, which was by Ralph Adams Cram. And you can see that it's a very clear and strong Gothic. Most close to Christ in St. Luke's is St. Thomas Fifth Avenue, New York, Kevin's alma mater. And you can see the square tower at the corner, the Gothic in the middle, and this imposing nave leading to the very powerful reredos at the end, which clearly, and in addition, it has this asymmetric form where the left side has a double aisle and the right side has a single narrow aisle, much like our Selden Chapel side compared with the so-called south aisle, even though it's on the east side of the church. So this is the context within which Christ in St. Luke's was designed. Now, whether Cram had a personal hand in it, whether he mentored it, whether Watson and Huckle cribbed it out of magazines, at this point we don't know, but we have contacted the present principal of the firm of Cram and Ferguson, who's going to help us research it. So in the annual meeting, we did talk about opportunities and challenges that we face. Most significantly, And we think because of the priority everyone has indicated for the worship space and for the organ and for the music program, the first thing we're going to talk about is what it takes to revive to restore the organ and to deal with improvements in the worship space. A committee has been formed of members. Would the organ committee members who are here stand up, please, so we can all see you? And they've all been working very hard to research very rigorously over the course of the last 9 months to research the organ. And Kevin Kwan is going to come forward and give you the summary of their findings. And somehow we're magically going to switch to another slideshow. Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Ray. This is not a repeat of the presentation from the annual meeting, but it does kind of highlight the important points, and then there's an expansion to this presentation. So for those of you who were here, just bear with me for a little bit while I review what the current state of the organ is. But before we do that, we must take stock in the role of our pipe organ. And for over 50 years, and before that there was another organ here built by the Austin Company, but starting from '63, for over 50 years, the organ has been an integral part of our worship as a parish, as a leader of diocesan services, for concerts in the Hampton Roads area. So really, a really central role that our organ plays. The current organ was built in 1963 by Cassavant from Canada. Those of you who will remember Grover Overley, he was a representative of Cassavant, so he was pivotal to installing the organ. I'm sorry this picture blocks the next line, but it says in 1997 it was enlarged and partially renovated by Laterno Organ Company, which is actually a daughter or a child company of the Cassavant firm. There are over 70 ranks of pipes, over 3 manuals and pedals, which approximately is about 3,500 pipes. So the pipes that you see from the church, there's about 100 there, but there are really about 3,400 more behind what you see. And gravity, the lack of temperature and moisture control, and the deterioration of the chambers have taken a great toll. So we believe that it is now time to take corrective action before things get worse. So what are the issues? First, safe and proper access. You can see this straight ladder going up into the organ chamber above the chapel, and that's the only access there is. The same thing is in the back of the church in the bell tower. The organ is extremely cramped, and you can kind of tell, there I am, and there are the pipes on one side and the wall of one of the chambers on the other side, and there's not enough room for me to even kind of stand up straight. Over the last 6 months, we've noticed some rapid deterioration. This is the roof of one of the chambers, and the insulation is starting to fall down. So I haven't checked in the last few weeks, but it may already be on the floor. There is a kind of a broken window right in that chamber with broken glass and lots of debris. This is one of the walls of the chamber that has water and possibly termite damage from the past. Here is some debris from the ceiling, and you can see that it's falling down onto the floor and into the open pipes. One of the things that happened in 1997 was they took the original organ and they didn't add more room, but they added more pipes. And so they kind of stuffed a lot of pipes into places where they probably shouldn't have. This is a wooden ladder right here, and you have to climb this ladder to go up into the rest of the organ, and every time someone does, they bend this pipe in. And this pipe as well is not as clear, but this one is very clear how you can just easily, very easily hit these pipes. And of course, you know, the pipes are individually lengthened and shortened, and that creates the pitch. And so if a pipe is changed, then the sound will also change, and that is not a good thing. These pipes are also bent and kind of in bad condition just because of where they are placed. Metal fatigue is an increasing problem that we see. Most of these pipes are built of a material called spotted metal, which is a combination of several metals. And you can see how the pipe is very narrow at the bottom, and then it gets very big at the top. And that's the normal, the way pipes work, some pipes at least. And, but some of these pipes are so heavy on the top that is causing the pipe to bow down here. And eventually they will kind of collapse onto themselves. So you can see these two bendy pipes should be like their neighbors straight up, but they're starting to bow. And this is probably the most telling comparison side by side. This was taken in 2013, and this pipe is now completely collapsed and therefore out of use. And that's just one example. So, other problems that we can't see. There are lots of leathers in the pipes, in individual pouches that allow air to go into the pipes. And most of these leathers are now 50 years old, which is about the lifespan of normal organ leathers, and they need to be replaced. The wiring needs to be replaced so that I think in the past we've been quite vulnerable to lightning strikes, and that has kind of caused the organ to stop working. And the organ console needs updating. The organ committee, after about a year's work, have identified a company called Foley Baker, or FBI, from Tolan, Connecticut, as the best company to rebuild the organ. They are primarily a maintenance and reconditioning firm. They have an excellent reputation, and some of their notable projects include Trinity Church in Boston, Duke Chapel in Durham, and the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. A few months ago, Stephen Leiss and I took a trip down to Duke Chapel, as you can see here, kind of a similar architecture to us, except maybe a little bit grander. But you know, the chambers on both sides, and the organ console down here on the floor. And Foley Baker redid their organ a few years ago, and we went to inspect their work. We were quite impressed by their work. Everything was immaculately clean and well lit, and logically laid out and organized, even to the degree of these ties that are tying the cables together are all individually measured so that they are evenly spaced. Really great work. And their philosophy is that the better you can lay out the organ and light it, the better chance it has of staying in tune and well preserved. So they really created a wonderful situation for this organ to live as long as possible. This is a potential side-by-side comparison. This is one of our pipes that we have, and you can see the scroll in the back of the pipe has been kind of makeshiftly repaired in the past. But this is what happened when they restored their pipe. Same sort of scroll, and you can just see the difference in what our organ can be if we let Foley and Baker do the work. And so what is the proposed work for our organ? It's to construct a new chamber to relieve overcrowding, which I will talk about in just a second, to re-leather the entire organ and rewire, as I mentioned before, to clean the instrument because there's lots of debris, repair or replace damaged pipework, which includes the collapsed pipes, update the organ console appointments, and build a new chest, which is a wind chest, the lungs of the organ, for uniform mechanics. Right now, the organ has two types of chests, and that doesn't really work well because one of them speaks a split second faster than the other chest. And musically, when that comes together, it's just slightly off. So we've explored the possibility of opening up this wall, this window in the church right next to this chamber, and the organ console, to give you perspective, is on the floor on this side. So this is the eagle side. Open up this window and put some of the big pipes into that chamber, which will help relieve the overcrowding in the other two chambers. On the other side of that window is the current music library, which I'm not sure if any of you have been up to, but we do have a music library, and it houses all of our music. So that's a possibility to open up the window, which is around right here. That's where the window is. And that, if we create a chamber in this whole area, that would help relieve some of the overcrowding. The projected cost is about $1.4 million, and in addition to a new chamber, so about $1.5 million. Now, I say this I'm just telling you that the organ business is not a business that makes money. These are just the kind of the prices that the organs cost these days, mostly because of materials, and it's so expensive for wood and metal these days that this firm really, all organ companies are charging about this much. And the replacement cost, for your information, for a new instrument of similar caliber is at least $3 million. And so we definitely don't want to get rid of our organ because there's a lot of good things in it, but this is the cost of refurbishing. And so, as I've said before, we're living on borrowed time. Over my last 2+ years here, there are several things that have already gone awry with the organ that are new since I've been here. So we don't have to fix the organ tomorrow, but eventually, over time, more and more things will fail, and that's why we need to address this problem before it gets out of control. So now, we believe, is the time to restore the organ for future generations. And I think, is this the time that we're going to have the organ committee come up, who's chaired by Dr. John Ford, Stephen, Priscilla, and Warren are here from the organ committee. I hate to say it, but Stephen Leist is going to be leaving us. He's been appointed the organist and choir master of St. Andrew's Church in Norfolk, right in West Ghent. And so we're proud of him, but we're very sad that he's going to be leaving us. But he has agreed to stay on the organ committee to see this thing through. So does anybody have any questions for the organ committee right now? Yes?
I was always under the impression that it was very hot up in the chamber.
It is.
And is there any regard being measured about that?
Definitely. The chamber on top of the chapel, Selden Chapel, has 3 exterior walls. If you look outside the church, it kind of looks like a little transept sticking out. That is the organ chamber. The chamber on top of the other side, on the eagle side, has no exterior walls. And so due to the lack of insulation on the chapel side, that side can get much hotter in the summer, and much colder in the winter because it's not as well protected as the other side. And musically speaking, wood and metal contract and expand with heat. And if one side can get really out of tune, it's going to fight with the other side. And so that does not produce a very good musical combination. And so in this work, they are going to address the insulation and refinishing of that chamber so that it can stay better in tune. Yes?
Is that $1.5 million estimate, does that include an addition perhaps in the as an antiphonal organ?
It does not. That chamber, though, there's a chamber in the back of the church that has golden pipes. We call them dummy pipes because they're not working. But there used to be a division back there, and they took it out in the 60s. From all accounts that I heard, that it wasn't quite very successful because that, once again, is not insulated. That tower is not insulated, and so those pipes were vulnerable to whatever was coming into the tower, and it was fighting kind of with the front. There's always talk of expanding the organ, and we could put something back there, but this current proposal does not include the back of the church. Carl.
How long would the project take, and does the price include renting a temporary organ?
No, there's no temporary organ included in that price.
Although it's probably going to take about a year from start to finish. I did talk to Foley Baker, Mike Foley, on Friday or Thursday, and he said that they do have a free digital organ that they loan out, but it might be too small for our space. So we're just going to have to see what's right for us. But probably during that time we would rent a digital organ to kind of get us through the renovation.
Kevin, I can't put a date on it, but it hasn't been so many years since the organ was shipped back to Canada, to Montreal.
97, yeah.
For something. Is any of what needs to be done now a duplication of what was done then?
Stephen?
There may be a little that's been done, but that project that was done in 97 did not address these issues that are being addressed now. And many of those are issues that were not issues in 1997. You know, the organ leather was still in good shape, the wiring of the organ was still in good shape, things like that. But over the 20 years almost since that time, new things have arisen that were not a part of that plan and would not.
This is not a duplication of effort.
Right.
Does this, you showed pictures of the insulation falling off, the broken window and so on. Does this price include fixing all of those structural things and the exterior work?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much. I mean, most of that work is really not that expensive.
Right.
So that's why we're estimating 1.5. Yeah. But the thing is, you know, the organ if you're going to do the work, you need to take out the whole organ, and that requires scaffolding and heavy lifting and rigging. And so once we have the organ out, then we can easily address those issues. But right now, because there's only one ladder that goes up into that chamber, there's not really a good way to fix those problems. So that's why we're just kind of waiting until we do it all at once. Megan, Drew?
Would the worship space still be accessible during the renovations, or would we move to a temporary location?
It would probably be accessible. We may need to close it for a week or two while the pipes are being taken out or while they're being put back in. But in general, we probably won't need to relocate for too long. We may need to relocate for a few weeks. I'm not sure yet. Other questions?
Is it possible to do the work in phases, or do you have to take out the entire organ at once? First question, and second question, you say that there are other firms and they all charge about the same, but have you gotten any competitive bids?
Yes, we've gotten quite a few competitive bids. This was by far the best one.
Okay.
And Stephen, do you want to mention the phases?
Well, it would not make sense to do it in phases. It's much better to do it all at once. Having been through a similar project in my last parish, it is the most efficient, most cost-effective way to do it.
Is it possible to add an additional access to the chambers?
Well, one of the things that they are researching right now is installing a mechanical ladder that will come down at a push of a button, an electronic ladder. And that will certainly make things a little bit easier. I'm not sure if, I'm not sure if there is another access that we can use unless we go onto the roof of the chapel, which has been talked about in the past, but we haven't really thought about that right now.
It is quite a job going up that ladder. All of us have done this and multiple times, and it is something many of you would not want to have to do.
Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned the issue of temperature and humidity earlier. Does that need to be co-managed with the organ repair? Or can that be done at a separate time? Together, yeah. That's all together. Yeah, organs like to live at very stable climate controls. So if it's hot, it wants to stay hot. If it's cold, it wants to stay cold. But this whole fluctuation is what is causing it to deteriorate quickly. Yes?
The pipes, when the bad pipes are redone, will they be done out of spotted metal, or is there a different type of metal that can be used that would be more stable?
Many of them will probably still be spotted metal because that's the kind of material that many organ pipes are made from, have been for a long time. Part of the rework is that those pipes will be better supported than they are now. They're not tied up or held up very well, and that's what is leading to the collapse.
Plus the temperature and moisture changes over time are very, very hard on the pipes, which would not happen with the new process.
Yes.
I have one crystal ball question. Replacement versus repair. Are we going to get about the same time frame out of them?
A brand new instrument would take much longer. If we were going to get a new instrument of comparable size, we'd be looking at a 2-year window at least.
No, I'm talking about lasting.
Oh,
For
lasting,
our
yes,
purposes.
yes. Lifetime of the instrument before refurbishment would be necessary, yes.
Yes.
Is there a benchmark before the price goes up significantly? Before it deteriorates and worse?
Not really. I mean, that price is pretty much good until we sign on the dotted line, I think.
Our communication with them has indicated that they're really not in a big hurry to change the pricing structure.
Now, that being said, organ companies are generally pretty small and they handle big jobs, and we need to get on their calendar. And for instance, if we were ready to go today, but they're not ready for another 9 months, we have to wait 9 months because they can't handle 2 giant organs in their studio. And so that's why it's important for us to kind of plan ahead to say, well, if we're going to be ready to do this in a few years, then we need to get on their calendar so they can have us ready to go.
And to follow up on an earlier question as well as relate to that, one of the things that we particularly liked about Foley Baker is that they are primarily a maintenance firm. They look at the organ from a maintenance standpoint, ease of access, getting around, how you work with it, as opposed to a builder, and we did look at some builders, and it was more like they were trying to sell us a new instrument rather than to work with what we had.
Yes.
I went to a church in New London, Connecticut that actually had Foley Baker come and restore our Ian Skinner organ, and they really did an excellent job. In fact, being so close to their offices, we had a problem that happened before a concert on Sunday evening, and we called them and they came and fixed it almost immediately, but we were very close to their place.
They have a very good reputation for these sorts of jobs. You know.
They're also really accommodating. We've been amazed at
I mean, the people were really nice. I mean, they're excellent people.
We got the hard sell from some of these companies because they really want you to build, have a brand new instrument, which doesn't really make any sense financially.
Right.
Especially since there's so much that's still good in what we have.
Any other questions? Yes.
What's the proposed timeline?
Well, we don't know yet because the organ needs to be, and I think Ray can answer this maybe a little bit better, but we want to do this logically, and we want to not rush anything, and we need to look at what else needs to go on at the same time while the organ's out. And so that's kind of the $64,000 question right now. But we hope maybe, to get this going in the next year or two. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, the last question was an excellent lead-in to what I'm going to be talking about. In the annual meeting, I laid out a list of all the things that we have ahead of us over who knows how long a period of time. And our goal is to get ourselves a plan so we know where we're going. And part of this process today and in 2 weeks and a month after that will be to see if the parish as a whole agrees with what is beginning to become a growing consensus, that the organ and the worship space are the most important things to move forward with first. That's the direction we're going in. But that's not a decision yet. That's something we want to knock everybody's input on. So when the organ is removed, there are things you can do which you really should not do, or maybe even could not do, while the organ is in place. Because organs, not only do they like even temperatures, they like relatively clean environments and are extremely allergic to dust. Will start sneezing at a moment's notice if there's too much dust being generated. And much of the work that's needed in the rest of the worship space will generate a lot of dust and construction noise and construction dust. And the question was asked about whether we would be without the use of the church for a while. It won't be so much because of the organ, but because of some of these other construction operations, which may or may not be possible to work around. So I'm going to just quickly share with you a couple of the things that are architectural modifications. Kevin has already talked about the architectural modifications for the organ, particularly repairing the existing chamber, putting in a new HVA system, and updating the electrical system. This is a plan I wanted to show you which explains a little bit the impact of what the new chamber is. This item up here is the existing chamber. The one down here is the music library, and you can see that will take over not only the music library but be part of the stage for the children's area. So this is all a little bit like pulling the thread of a suit. If you make one change somewhere, you're going to have to make another change somewhere else. There are a whole series of architectural improvements that are needed that should best be done at the same time. For example, we have these glorious stained glass windows, and over the years there has been a very careful program of restoring them. So in 1994, the upper windows, the clerestory windows, were repaired, and some of the lower windows were also repaired. In 2012, the company called Willett Hauser from Minnesota, which is a stained glass specialist, identified 4 lower windows in need of major repair. We are going to have another survey by Willett Hauser this month to give us an update on what the conditions are for all of the windows, and we're looking forward to hearing the news. But just to give you an idea, some of the things that are happening to the stained glass windows is that they're cracking. Some of the glass is cracking, and that's because things are slipping in them and they get out of whack. Some of them are bowing. Lead in particular is subject to metal fatigue when it gets very hot, so it's bowing. Some of the glass is sliding around. So these 4 windows in particular need to be removed, taken out of the church, and restored and worked on. We had a price a couple years ago of about $50,000 for those 4 windows. We don't know if there are other windows that will need to be done. I think everybody is aware of potential splinter attacks in the pews with the cracking that's happening with some of the pews. Everybody's favorite thing to talk about, I think, are the condition of the kneelers, which need to be substantially redone. And then there's the squishy floor phenomenon that we've got, where the floor, which is the wood floor, which is on sleepers, which means pieces of wood above the subfloor below, the sleepers are giving way, and so the floor is giving way, producing tripping hazards in various places. Now, all 3 of those things, pews, kneelers, and floors, should always be done at the same time. You take the pews out, have them worked on, take the kneelers out, have them worked on, deal with what you've got to do with the floor, refinish it, and then bring everything back. That's one operation. That's part of the shopping list, another big item on the shopping list. Then there's lighting. Kevin has talked from the very beginning. He ruined a performance, actually, that we attended one time for me, because just before it started, he said, now, I don't want to influence your thinking, but while you're sitting where you are, try to see who's performing up front. And the truth is that you can't, because for 2 reasons. One, the light, there's no light on that spot. And when you get to the chancel steps, many performers stand in front of those steps. In many churches, this problem is, which means that their head level, you can't see them. In many churches, there are efforts to extend the level of the chancel floor out into the nave so that you have an effective platform. Then there are other parts of some of the choir has difficulty seeing their music because there's no direct light. And then there have been a series of improvisations. That glow that you see is a sort of bare bulb attached to a wire that's attached to a cord that gets plugged in before and after processions in the choir, and there are other kinds of wiring problems. So these are things we need to deal with. On the other hand, there also is the question of celebrating our architecture. Gothic architecture, like the nave of St. John the Divine, is lofty and high. You want to see the ceiling and have the ceiling lit. The lighting that we presently have gives us a dark ceiling, so you never get that uplight. So that's one very dramatic thing that can be done to change it. Now, how many people know that we have a Tiffany light fixture here? Many people do. How many people have looked at it in the last 5 years? Okay, it's hard to see though, isn't it? Because it's way high and it has a very loud or bright light source in it, blinding you when you look at it. It's a great treasure. It needs to be revised, lowered, maybe made a more integral part of that. And then there's the exterior. Many people have said in our processes it wouldn't be that they miss having the Te Deum window lit from the outside, which it used to be during Christmas services. We've discussed this with a lighting consultant and discussed the lighting of the church. With new LED lighting, you can get dramatic lighting effects at much lower cost than you ever could in the past. Think about the Slover Library downtown, which has remarkable LED lighting system on the outside of the Seaboard building. There are many ways of lighting it. For example, this is the Rockefeller Chapel in Chicago, and look at the way in which lighting is used to wash light that brings the architecture out into light. So all of these are possibilities because as part of the organ, we've got to redo the wiring system. We're redoing the wiring system. We really ought to be looking at all these lighting things that can be done. And then, of course, there's cleaning the stone and repairing the stone. There are actual places where it's broken, certainly where it's been stained from water damage coming in. Years of wax buildup at the base of the stone need to be cleaned. And again, this is a process that makes a mess that organs are allergic to. So it's all the kind of thing that can be done. So these are the opportunities and challenges that we face. Focus on the organ, on restoring and repairing the worship space. We don't have costs for these other items. We're at the beginning stage of this. But our notion is to continue this process of planning. Brace yourself. We're going to hold lots of meetings. Even if everybody gets worn out and nobody comes, we're still going to have meetings and try to get input from everybody. We're going to try to continue to keep this in the terms of shopping lists. We're very cognizant of the need to develop a funding strategy for each of these things. Organs and stained glass windows and things like that are different from general parish construction. Very often, the individual donors will make large grants to it, and some people have already come forward voluntarily without being asked and offered to contribute at that scale. We also have an historic building, and we're eligible for historic tax credits, which in Virginia could represent 20% of the cost of the work we're doing, including work on the organ. So there are many different ways to develop this strategy. And we believe maybe the most important thing is for us to prepare this long-range architectural master plan for the campus and move forward so that we have a footprint, and that we'll use the master plan to identify different funding strategies. I always say that a master plan of the right kind is like economic flypaper. You want it to attract funding and get it to stick. You want to get people excited and have a clear path for moving forward. And that is where we are.
Thank you, Ray.
Before we close, I just want to again thank Ray Gindros, and would you ask the architectural committee to stand? What you see today represents Molly, and Brittany was just here.
And also the steering committee. We have
And the steering committee, Seeger Whitaker and John Ford. Yeah. You guys have done a tremendous job. This is a lot of work because of how it's integrated. I just want to give a bird's eye view from what I've seen in studying parishes like this over the last 4 years. And I'll underscore this with a conversation that I had with our British chaplain last week. And that is that looking at the trends in church attendance and church success in the Anglican communion, but also across the major denominations, and even in some of the mega churches now, we see a pattern. And the pattern is you have to look ahead, and when you look ahead, you see our future right now in places like Great Britain. and that is that the cathedral churches are doing very well. The smaller churches are not able to survive with, at least with full-time clergy. Some are surviving in this diocese with retired clergy, but that cadre will eventually die out. So we're seeing the closing of many churches and the consolidation into larger, more cathedral-like churches. And Christ in St. Luke's is precisely that kind of church in the Norfolk area. And that's why I think that we're all kind of aware that it appears that the planets are aligned in terms of the gifts and experiences that our leadership has and the people who are here to really leave a legacy for the future in the Norfolk community. The other piece is, and I'll leave you with this, is that we're really becoming a part of an artistic triangle. We find ourselves, you always look at the geographical setting, what's there in terms of, as one of the components of your parish mission. And this does not exclude our homeless, our outreach, and all those other pieces. But we've come to realize that we are really in the center of an artistic an arts district. There is the arts district that's being developed to the east, but then you have the Opera House, you have the Chrysler Museum, and you have Christ in St. Luke's, which in and of itself is an artistic treasure, and we fill that with the artistry of music. And so we have to be mindful both of our mission to this parish, but also our mission to the larger Norfolk community, which is developing a very imaginative and sophisticated artistic life. And an artistic life in a community really is one foundation for development. So I want us to kind of broaden our thinking as we look at what we're doing here, that this is our mission to leave to future generations, and also a piece of our outreach to the larger community, which we all love very dearly. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.